Well, good day, people. So I've been doing a little bit of an exchange with one of my subscribers here named Mickle1, Mickle Meme 1, and he had asked me about Stoic virtues and what I meant by Stoic virtues, and what would be a way to understand virtues in the Stoic world. And I wanted to say some things about that. I guess I've tried to give some links to it, and I'll put a link down in the below bar. But one of my books, this was a book that I did, I guess, some years ago, but it was called Sources of Significance, and it tries to develop a neo-Stoic philosophy. And I'm going to see if I can't try to talk a little bit about Stoicism, the Stoic virtues, what is meant by the virtues for the Stoics, and then also, I guess, try to contextualize some of that in terms of what the kind of neo-Stoicism that I'm advocating, and would hopefully this will be a little bit of clarity for him, and um, hopefully, again, we could have a discussion about this. If you don't have a copy of my book, please go get it. Get your library to get a copy of it. I understand people don't necessarily have money for that, but I would love to have more people talk about the Stoics and to learn more about some of that tradition. Okay, so I think the first thing that I would say is that the Stoics were the period of early Stoa, middle Stoa, and later Stoa spanned the development from polytheism into monotheism into, I think, something like the beginning of the Spinozianist notion of divine order. So some of it gets very tricky, but so what you have is it ranges from the gods and the fates to fate to divine providence to order and you know, destiny, that the Stoics believed that the cosmos itself was proportion like and balanced and in a harmony and a kind of a ratio. And it was characterized by this orderliness as a logos, and the human shared a portion of that divine mind, of that divine order. And when I say that, I don't think, you don't want to think of like a maker god in a literal sense, but it has to do with the degree of self-relation that is possible. See, it has to do, again, with problems of how we are to understand our part in the larger whole. I mean, there's a kind of deep organicism that runs throughout Stoic philosophy. And, the question would be, do you want to live like a sage? And for them, living like a sage would be things like achieving a kind of tranquility, a kind of peace of mind, and learning how to live so as to avoid evil and to do good. Right now, it's so important here to understand that for the Stoics, none of the virtues are done for any reason other than to be virtuous. They're not an admonishment like you're going to get punished later, or you're going to be rewarded later, or there's some ulterior motive for doing the virtues. No, the virtues are their own reason, and they are not only in accord with the order and balance and harmony of the cosmos, but they're that part of you which you do have control over, and it's what you can sort of align yourself with, right? I mean, the basic distinction in all Stoicism is to first make in your own conscious mind a very clear distinction between what's under your control and what's not under your control. And once you've done that, you only worry about things that are under your control. The things that are under your control could be good or evil. If it's outside of your control, it's neither good nor evil. And I thought I would give just a little snippet of this. This is from the Enchiridion of Epictetus. And this is, again, one of the very opening passages. He says, of all existing things, some are in our power, others are not in our power. In our power are thought, impulse, will to get, will to avoid, and a word, everything which is our own doing. Things not in our power include our body, property, reputation, office, in a word, everything which is not our own doing. Make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, you are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be. Then test it by those rules that you possess, and first by this, the chief test of all. Is it concerned with what is in our power, or what is not in our power. If it is concerned with what is not in our power, be ready to answer that it is nothing to you. See, that really is this key notion that you're trying to learn for, again, a kind of psychological harmony. And it's not just psychological opposed to reality. It's not like window dressing and or frosting and like a gloss over things. No, the point is that the orderliness of the world is such that its order gave under human prerogative certain capacities and made other aspects of life outside of human jurisdiction. And the more that a person understands that and only aligns with what's under their power and ignores what's outside of their power, the more that they're able to live as a sage and, again, have a sort of psychological peace of mind that is akin to what they thought the gods had. And when I say the gods, I mean a regulative sense of order through balance and ratio. See, reason and ratio have this common root of, the distances, I guess, on frets, as to do with musical instruments. But I guess the point here is that there is a regulative order in the cosmos that we can align ourselves with, and that's really what we're trying to do. Now, in the classic world, it's more than just saying, only concern yourself with what's under your power and don't worry what's outside of your power. And the athlete is the best example. The athlete is the person who you get out there and you do the best that you can, and whether you win or lose for the Stoics is neither good nor evil. The only thing that matters was, did you actually give it your best attempt? Because that was under your control. Whether or not other people cheat, how the other people judge it, what was the are other people better than you? Well, that isn't under your control. The only thing that you can control is how much you discipline yourself into actually trying. That's really the way the Stoics would come at it. So, but given that, there are very classic virtues, and I think it's interesting how many of these were appropriated by Christianity. I mean, Christianity talks about its cardinal virtues, which I think roughly are prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. And I'll see if I can talk about those. But I mean, the Stoics predated those, and the Stoics, yeah, it was wisdom, courage, justice, and prudence. So I want to talk about those briefly, and then I want to move on to the way that, in sources, what I try to do in bringing these up to date and talking about them in today's world, things like that. Okay, so when you're talking about wisdom as one of the virtues of the Stoics, it's to realize that there is a discernment moment by moment of appropriate action. And having a kind of prudence it's a kind of foresight about what is the best course of action given here right now, what is under my control and what's not outside, or what's outside of my control. And so you begin right there with this: do you have the wisdom to keep vigilant, I guess, in some way over that line? I mean, that is one of the first virtues. And prudence is having some imagined ability to see how things will unfold, even though they're still in a nascent state. Okay, courage. Courage is a classic virtue, I guess, throughout the ancient world. And courage means not only courage to face all of life's hardships, but it has to do with resilience and fortitude, the ability to endure and to bear. And this is partly that, the one thing that is under your control is the freedom of mind of how you interpret what's going on. And, it's, again, you try to think of the athlete whose body says, I'm tired and let's quit practicing. And the person says, no, we really have to go on. Or, I mean, it partly had to do with gladiators in battle, but it also has to do with just facing the day in a courageous way. Sending, today it could be sending emails that are going to take some courage to tell some people what they need to say. Now, I wanted to give a little passage here and stress again this notion of divine providence and the question of can one align oneself with the regulative order that characterizes the balance and harmony of the world, and how is mind itself made in the image of that order. I mean, that's basically one of the Stoic arguments. I thought I would share this. This is from the Harvard Classics, and it's one of the golden sayings of Epictetus, and it's a little passage where uh, I think this was a little bit in the, the Harvard Classics gives a little bit more of the monotheistic orientation. I think it lends itself to the Christian appropriations that went on of Stoicism. But here's a wonderful little discussion of that logic, right? And I think the point is that it's a logic. We don't want to think, from my own perspective, I'm. I don't see the Stoics as having a notion of God in the Christian monotheistic sense. No, not at all. It has to do with a principle of order and self regularity. And because the human can talk with itself, because we come to terms with ourselves, because we can try to bolster our own courage, just as an example, that self relation is a principle of balance that not only characterizes the cosmos, but it characterizes that part of us which we can try to appropriate uh, in terms of how it benefits um, us and I guess the larger world. I mean, the Stoics really do see themselves as citizens of a political arena, not just animals of nature and not supernatural beings who are awaiting something somewhere else. Okay, at any rate, but here's a wonderful passage from Golden Sayings of Epictetus. He says, "But what saith God? Had it been possible, Epictetus, I would have made that body of thine and thy possessions free and unimpeded. But as it is, be not deceived. It is not thine own, it is but finely tempered clay. Since then this I could not do, I have given thee a portion of myself in the power of desiring and declining, of pursuing and avoiding, in a word, the power of dealing with the things of sense. If you neglect not this, uh, but place all that thou hast therein, thou shalt never be let or hindered, thou shalt never lament, thou shalt never blame or flatter any. What then? Seemeth this to thee a little thing? God forbid. Be content therewith. And so I prayed the gods." And again, this little passage, it's as if the Stoics, and particularly in the ethical and moral writings of Epictetus, the Stoics believed that no matter what the conditions of life, you have been given all that you need in order to deal with it. That somehow the ability to reason, the ability to exercise wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, these and to discern what's under your power and not under your power, and then just don't worry about what's outside of your power, and to only focus on what you can do. Literally spend all of your time and energy only engaged in the things that are under your power, right? Think of the athlete. You set up the arrow to shoot it, and setting up the target is a good, that's under your control. Aiming, that's good, it's under your control. Once you let go of the arrow, neither good nor evil can happen. If it hits, it's not a good. If it misses, it's not an evil. Those are outside of your control. We have a tendency to do the exact opposite. We're really worried about the whether it hits or misses, and we seem to not be as concerned about really setting up the target where it needs to be and really carefully aiming. Okay, so I mean, I think that's part of the courage. The courage is this issue of self-relation as it became possible in the human. Justice, for the Stoics, justice is a huge issue, that proportion and balance and harmony and recognizing, having a sensitivity to injustice. Um, it, it, again, it has to do with balance. Has to do with balance. I think temperance is another one that perhaps classically aligns with Christianity, and it has been appropriated by Christianity. But for the Stoics, temperance was very important. That having self-restraint, having the ability to know when to say when, having a sense of moderation. This was crucial not only in diet and in alcohol, but in wealth, in sex, in so many areas of life. People can become excessive and become, I guess, highly neurotically driven by some of this. And so you know, to realize that, you do have some of these capacities under your power. Now, okay, let me see if I can back up here just for a second. Okay, I guess what I want to do here, and I'm already 15 minutes in, it's going so quickly. I think what I want to do is I just turn to how I'm addressing these today. Now, again, there are some problems with some of this, right? I mean, obviously, I think today we know a lot more about genetics and predispositions and some of the problems of restraint and control. I think we do want to talk about addiction in certain ways. I think for the Stoics, they would say, well, you want to be careful what you practice because you're going to get good at it. And so the initial judgment of having wisdom, see, it does play into that. But let's see if we can just back up. I mean, from my own perspective, I would say, yes, these classic virtues, the sort of the cardinal virtues, they are very important for a person's sense of well-being, for peace of mind, for tranquility. But the way that I would try to shake it out today, and in the modern world of how we can understand Stoicism, or what I'm calling a neo-Stoic heroism, what would that look like in today's world? I just have four different points here to try to talk about. One is the issue of, and again, all of these were already talked about, so it's not anything new. But I said, so one of them is learning how to focus on moral intent and learning how to remove false belief. See, the Stoics held, and this is particularly Chrysippus and Chrysippus's debate with Aristotle. Chrysippus held that all emotions were the outcome of false belief, and that you could tell when you had a false belief because you would be experiencing an emotion. See, the Stoics didn't think, let's be stodgy and bottle up our emotions. We sometimes think of like the Vulcan. You get Star Trek images there, right, of the Vulcans being these sort of futuristic, emotionless people, and I think it seems like they're bottling it up or something. No, the ancient Stoics, particularly Chrysippus, he taught that, yeah, all emotions were the product of false belief. And if you remove, they call it extirpating the passions. If you remove all false belief, you simply don't have any emotion. And when I say false belief, I'm really getting at people who lapse into taking under their power what's not under their power, and failing to take under control what's under their control. See, there does seem to be a sense in which when we do that, beliefs, occurrences, things can go on, and suddenly we find ourselves having an emotion. And for Aristotle, he would say no. That sometimes there is an appropriate emotion for an appropriate response. And I think when we look with hindsight, there may be something, right, obviously there. I don't think we want to say that all emotions are false beliefs, but there does seem to be something quite right-minded about that orientation, to try to understand when and where we're getting riled, what is riling us, and then from any time that you find yourself emotionally riled, the question is, what is the moral response? That is, what do you actually have control over? What don't you? And just put your efforts there. And you try to understand that you may be having a problem of lacking the wisdom of differentiating when you're experiencing emotion. Okay, the next one would be a whole section. I have a whole big part in the book on Stoic etiquette. And the Stoics did have a pretty robust notion of etiquette. They talked about life as if it were a wedding, and it was very important to have civility and politeness in your interaction, and to not be overly ostentatious or showy, but also not to be sort of so abandoning of custom and propriety that you weren't able to, I guess, again, function as if you were at a wedding. So, the example would be you're at a wedding, and a dish is coming around. Well, you don't reach over and grab the dish out of someone else's hand. You wait till it comes to you. And if it passes you, you gracefully say, the dish passed me. Now, maybe you try to say, could someone please pass me that? It missed my spot or something like this. But there is a sense of kind of ongoing graciousness of how one interacts with others, that you can't control how others treat you, but you can control how you treat others. And there is a graciousness of being respectful to others, being compassionate to others, but it's not a sort of mawkishness. It's not It's not recommending pity as it's become, I guess, in the Christian tradition. It's more about propriety and appropriateness having to do, again, with things like harmony, balance, and proportionality, things like this. Okay, I think, and that's really big in today's world. To me, this is one of the major issues of what does it mean to live in a civil society. It's learning how to treat one another in some way with uh, with a right to again to be treated as a person who has dignity, self-respect, has a claim to a certain worth and value. Okay, next one I think is sort of related to the temperance issue and moderation, but it's indifference to wealth. Yeah, I think this is, again, very much practiced in the ancient world, and to be indifferent to wealth isn't to advocate poverty. It's not. It's to be utterly indifferent to it. And I think it's so important to understand that in the ancient world, Marcus Aurelius, powerful ruler, and Epictetus, freed slave, were the two great spokespeople, at least as we understand it today. Now, maybe Seneca, again, a kind of ruler. But what you find there is, again, very wealthy, powerful people and very destitute, beat down, a lamed, really quite bad, beaten slave. And both of them found, one of them found that wealth doesn't make you happiness, and one found that poverty doesn't make you miserable. And across both of them, you find a kind of indifference to wealth. It's what Seneca talks about as you want to possess wealth fearlessly, to not become ego attached to it. But it's not to advocate a kind of, you know, give up your wealth and grab your begging bowl, but it's not corporate, venture capitalist out there trying to pursue wealth. Again, you try to be indifferent to it because in some way it's outside of your control. Now, there are things that are preferred in the Stoic realm. You can prefer them, but you have to prefer them with a kind of indifference. And again, it gets really very nuanced. I think the further you get into, well, what's under my control, what's not under my control, and is health not under my control? I mean, I can try to eat right. Yes, you can try to eat right and you can do everything you can, but ultimately your health is not under your control. Your body is a happenstance of fates. It's a happenstance of the order of the world, whatever that is. The last one I would give as a Stoic virtue is death acceptance. For the Stoics, it was utterly crucial that we come to terms with our basic nature, and our basic nature is that you're a corpse, and you're kind of alive here, but you've always already been dead as a precondition for your life. That is, you're not something that has a promise for anything other than this life. Now, I think there are some contestations about what the Stoics thought about the afterlife. Many just blanketly say, there's no life after this, and the gods gave you everything you need. Why could you not be happy with this? Others would say the gods saw fit for humans to never know if there's life after death. So, and to not worry about it because it's not under your control. Again, this issue of it's not under your control is really the I guess the key concept there that underpins all of the different Stoic virtues. I guess maybe the last thing that I would say here is I do think that this is psychological advice. I think it's very potent to learn about Stoicism, to learn about the practices and the kinds of discipline that Stoic philosophy can bring to one's life, and I think really help people out. But to simply call it psychology, to simply say, well, it's really just a kind of practice of psychology, well, I think that really misses it. I think they do want to say, and this is part of the issue that I've said in so many videos, that in some way, religion will never go away. That there's a kind of spirituality in the human that comes from logos, that comes from speech, and comes from the problem of self-relation. Now, it doesn't mean that all cultures everywhere will have organized religions. No, it means that humans dwell in some kinds of problems because they're able to think about what's not under their control and take it under their control as if they were. They have a natural transcendence. And transcendence is a key word. It's not to be confused with transcendent. Transcendent is this supernatural otherworldliness. No, transcendence is reaching beyond. It's the degree to which humans can reach beyond themselves, but this is where the tragedy comes in. They can reach too far and bring misery upon themselves because they bring under their control what's properly not under their jurisdiction. Okay, I hope that helps, Mick, and I would love to see some response from people. Okay, thanks.